pretty much just go through and take off all these things, these clips, these bolts, all this little loose stuff. This hydraulic clutch pusher, these little things clip to it, very easy. Then each side, pop off this thing. The CV axle just pops out. You got to get like a crowbar between the CV axle and the transmission, pop it on out. Do this to both sides. Then undo that bolt. There's two bolts, 17s. Undo that 17. Then there's two 17s over there. And oh, before you do that though, you gotta undo three 17s right there where the rear transmission mount is. There's three 17s, and then there's two 17s on the transmission mount, and you pop out that rear transmission mount. Then you start, and you get that 17, and then there's two 17s above that rear transmission mount. One of them's kind of hard to get to, but you could get to it from below. And then you get a jack under the engine there, and a jack under the transmission, and you do these three right here, 17s on the mount on the transmission. And then you lower these two jacks to kind of, get the engine going down. And now I'm removing 117 there and 117 there, and those are the last two 17s. Lowered it. These cleared, had to lower it enough to get the bolts out of here, and then just get a pry bar and start prying it off, pushing the transmission. The transmission's probably got to come 4 or 5 inches away from the engine, so that this spline, you're trying to get this spline out of the gear. So that's like 2.5, 3 inches or something. So, but it's got to come at least 2.5, 3 inches, and then it's got to come past this little, the pressure plate. So it's got to come 3 inches plus like an inch, so 4 inches out, and then you can start lowering it. And then it's just maybe hitting on some of this plastic stuff. But once you get that spline out, it's all good. Just pry it evenly all the way around. I've since got the flywheel resurfaced, brand new pressure plate, brand new clutch, brand new throwout bearing. Installed those, used a torque wrench, put a wrench on the other side of the crankshaft so that it doesn't spin when I torque it down. And then I figured out where all the bolts go on the engine and transmission, because it's a little bit confusing. Got to make sure that you know where they go to begin with, so that you don't put one too long in a place where it's too short and you end up like cracking the aluminum. And make sure it's all clean before you put the bolts in, because you do not want to crack the aluminum. By far the hardest part was getting the spline, the male end from the transmission, into the female end on the engine. By far the female end comes just to almost the end of the pressure plate. So you could, and I tried to do with the jack initially, a jack under the transmission, jack under the engine. Just did not work. So I really had to lower the jack on the transmission, or have somebody lower it, and then get ready in case I had to drop it, and then just hand on this end, hand on that end, bent over, picking up the transmission. You could kind of tilt it and kind of see almost the male end go into the female end, because I think that's where I was having issues, just like actually getting it to line up. So you could kind of see it if it's tilted, and then you put it in there, and then you kind of rotate it to kind of get the splines lined up, and just slide it on, and then have whoever's operating the jack it up to, so you don't have to be picking it up anymore. You could set it on the jack. But that was by far the hardest part. By far the hardest part. Once you get the spline in there, then you got to line up these holes. The bottom two were the easiest, but eventually I got a jack on that end to kind of help it, you know, because you got to tilt it down, let it go up, let it go down. You got to like really maneuver it. Then I got a jack over here to kind of twist it, because these holes are going to be very hard to line up, and that jack twists it, you know, rotates it, and this jack kind of tilts it. And you just got to really manipulate that until you get these holes lined up, get them started by hand, and then once you feel them tight, start cranking on with a wrench. The bolt above this, I can only get to with a wrench, so it takes a while. This one, the long bolt, very long. Once you get that going, takes a while. And you got 2 bolts up here, which I haven't got yet started. Maybe those be last. But it just takes a lot of time, a lot of, you know, twisting the jack just right. Should just take off this whole entire mount. It's a 15 on this side, right there, 15 on that side, and you just gotta pop out this, or that battery tray. Just pops out, boom, boom, and then 10 right here, maybe to kind of allow you to free up this thing so that you can get these bolts through, because otherwise I just couldn't do it. So not that bad if you take that off. It was binded and like it was not going in, so I just got down on the bottom one over there, the bottom closest to the driver's seat, and was just cranking on it, and boom, I hear a crack, or a boom, a big loud. I'm like, oh no, did I just, you know, crack the aluminum casing of the transmission or the engine? But I think what happened was there's a pin right here that was like stuck in the engine, like a guide pin, and the guide pin goes into this hole in the transmission for some reason, and like it must have been just not quite going in the hole, just hitting the edge of it. And I think putting a lot of pressure on it, on the bottom one, just boom, popped it in and went guided in, and boom, it slammed in. And so now up here the transmission's getting closer to the engine. If I do this again, I may take out that guide pin, because like, what's the point of it? I mean, that's ridiculous. That was hella sketchy. I mean, it wasn't going in, put a lot of pressure on it, then boom, it flies in there. I'm guessing, I'm hoping that's what happened. That's what it looks happened, because it got a lot, you know, the gap got a lot smaller. If I had to do it again, I'd take out that guide pin. I don't think there's any need for it. That's ridiculous.